Hello everyone, I'm Marty Owings and this is your Capitol Update for May 14th, 2013. As we broadcast from the Capitol, the Senate is meeting in session right now, and in the House behind us, they're in recess, is scheduled to reconvene any minute. Meanwhile, the governor has just signed the same-sex marriage bill into law while thousands of people are gathered on the Capitol Mall. Yesterday, the Senate passed the same-sex marriage bill with one Republican voting in favor of the measure. Last week, the House voted to pass the same bill with 4 Republicans joining all but 2 DFLers who voted to pass the measure. Governor Dayton has called the measure historic and signed it into law, as I said just minutes ago. Now, Minnesota joins 11 other states who have legalized gay marriage. To join us for a minute to talk a little bit about the historic moment up here at the Capitol and all of the events of the last few days is Representative John Lush from St. Paul. Thanks for being our guest
Thanks
tonight.
for having me, Marty.
Appreciate you coming up on short notice, Representative Lush. What does it mean to you and you think to the people of Minnesota to have passed same-sex marriage?
Marty, this was a big week. There are people around the Capitol, legislators, who say that they're not sure they'll have a bigger week for the rest of their term, and they can't recall having a bigger week in the history of the time that they've served here. So the Capitol was electric the entire time, sometimes a bit ripe as well, with people all crowded in there.
A little hotter today.
It was hotter, and it was not designed for fantastic airflow in this building.
That's right.
But there were a lot of people here, and they were cheering, and they were singing, and we could hear them when we were in the Capitol. When we were in the chamber debating the bill, we could hear them singing and chanting out in the rotunda, and it was an amazing place to be during the time. And I know even people in the opposition will never forget being here during that time.
What do you think it means for the state and the future of Minnesota and maybe our nation in general?
Well, I think what's really important is there's the idea that the state is still somewhat divided, a little bit 50-50 about this, but there's no question about the direction we're going. We are going in the direction of greater equality for citizens. And so ultimately I think the test for leadership today was, are you going to provide leadership? Or are you going to lick your finger and stick it in the wind and see when it's the most politically palatable for you to do it? And I think because leadership, DFL leadership, did take the reins and say this is going to happen, I think that gives them credibility in the eyes of Minnesotans, and not just with the Minnesotans that agreed with them on the issue. So I think it was smart leadership.
Well, let me put you in a funny role for a second. I know we're kind of off reservation, a little off script here, but I give you a rare opportunity to defend and talk about the positives of your colleagues here for a second. What about the votes that Fitzsimmons and Garofalo and others took? Were they courageous?
Absolutely, they were courageous. There's no question. Now, different people have different fears in their districts, so the level of courage varies, right? I mean,
I understand.
I received a few emails. Thank you for your courage for your vote, and I thought, well, in reality, my district fully expected me to vote that way.
Right,
it wasn't courageous at all.
Yeah.
Pat Garofalo is a senior member now. He can get away with that. He has survived adverse votes against his party in the past, so he's knowledgeable. It was still a courageous vote for him, and I think an honorable vote. But for the freshman, Fitzsimmons is one example. Absolutely. It took courage to do that. It took conviction to do that. But I think the important thing is the quote of Joe Radinovich, who, when asked, hang on a second, your district, and he was a DFLer who voted against it in a district that overwhelmingly approved the marriage ban last November, and he said, I'd rather have a clear conscience for the rest of my life than
be reelected, essentially, right? Isn't that what it
my
is?
constituents be happy with me. Yeah.
What about the 2 DFLers who voted no?
Well,
they got some splaining to do, or what's the story?
It was a tough vote all around. At the end of the day, we only needed 68, and we got 75. So for those folks, it wasn't like they were putting us in danger of losing. When they've ended, it'd be the difference between 75 and 77. So, I think in the long run, sure, they'll have some explaining to do, but we have to do that on every vote around here. How long it's hung over their head is, I think, commensurate to the guilty conscience they have, because it'll be reflected in other things they do. If they don't have a guilty conscience about it, they were fine with their vote, then I don't think it'll haunt them.
Will this resonate for you into the future in your later years? What will you look back on this
I
day?
honestly don't know. You know what? Sack, Mr. Sack, one of our great political cartoonists, recently won the Pulitzer Prize. A couple weeks ago, had a political cartoon. It was entitled "The Wrong Side of History Photo Shoot," and it had people up there saying, "I voted against women's suffrage. I voted for slavery." And then it has the next. The photographer saying next, and it has a little silhouette saying, "I voted against gay marriage."
Right. Yep.
So I'm really happy that I'm not going to be in that photo. And
I can
yes,
understand.
absolutely. When I'm laying on my deathbed, I will be able to say, "Okay." But there are many people who served decades in political office. I think of Strom Thurmond. Who voted blatantly for inequality. By the end of his career, had all kinds of votes in favor of civil rights. It's an awkward place to be. No, he wasn't the tip of the spear of equality,
Right.
but eventually he came around and had to explain to it himself and justify it to himself. I'm lucky enough not to have to be in that position when I'm old on this issue. Maybe I will be there on other issues, though.
John Lush, I always appreciate your insights, and thanks for taking the time to join us tonight.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Marty.
You bet. Take
Thanks.
care of the rest of the session, and hopefully you guys can get all your work done. I know it's short timing. Next week, right?
It is, but there's going to be very little sleep in the next week. But by the end of it, I think we'll be pleased with the product. I think the people of Minnesota will be as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Take it easy.
Care. A bill getting very little attention up by the media up here at the Capitol is House File 653, which exempts some social media discussions from the open meeting laws. Part of the bill reads as follows, quote, "The social media forum must be generally open to public participation," unquote. And finally tonight, campaign finance bills are headed for both the House and the Senate. Both measures would increase the amount of money candidates could raise. Lawmakers say the money is necessary because they have to compete with big spending by outside interests. The bills will both be heard the next couple of days up here at the Capitol. For more on these and other stories, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at MNCapNews and on Facebook at Minnesota Capitol Conversations. If you send us a good question, we'll ask it on the show like we do every week. For political news and analysis from the Capitol, tune in every Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. to KFEI's Morning Blend, 90.3 on the FM dial. And check us out at MNCapitolNews.com. For the Capitol Conversations crew, I'm Marty Owings. Thank you for watching.